I still remember the moment the snow started falling harder than it should have. One minute, I was confident I could make it home. The next, the road disappeared under a white blur, and my phone buzzed with alerts I didn't want to read. I wasn't alone. He was in the passenger seat, my son's best friend. Not a kid. Not anymore. He was home from college for the weekend, and I'd offered him a ride when the weather turned bad. It felt harmless at the time. Responsible, even. But the storm had other plans. Traffic slowed to a crawl, then stopped completely. Cars lined up in both directions, engines idling, hazard lights blinking like a quiet warning that no one was in control anymore. I turned off the radio. It was just static. We sat there in silence for a moment, listening to the wind shake the car. "I think we're stuck," I finally said. He nodded, looking out at the snow piling up faster than it could be cleared. "Yeah, looks like it." The realization settled in slowly. No movement, no exits, no help coming anytime soon. Just the two of us. I tried to keep things normal, asked him about school, about my son, about anything that didn't acknowledge how isolated we were. He answered politely, respectfully, the same way he always had. But something felt different. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the way the storm sealed us off from everything else. Or maybe it was the first time I noticed how much he'd changed. His voice deeper, his presence heavier than I remembered. An hour passed, then another. The heater struggled. The temperature dropped. I pulled my coat tighter around myself and laughed it off, pretending I wasn't uncomfortable. He noticed anyway. "Are you cold?" he asked. "A little," I admitted. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a blanket he'd left there earlier. "Here, this might help." I hesitated, just a second longer than necessary, before taking it. We shared the blanket, careful at first. Polite distance, elbows tucked in, everything proper. But the cold didn't care about propriety. As the minutes passed, the space between us closed naturally, inch by inch, until I could feel the warmth of him beside me. Not touching, just close. Too close to ignore. I told myself it was nothing. Just survival. Just circumstance. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that being snowed in like this, alone, quiet, cut off from the world, was changing the way everything felt. And deep down, I knew this night wasn't going to be as simple as waiting out a storm. The heater finally gave out with a soft click, and the car went quiet in a way that made the cold feel louder. I rubbed my hands together, trying to pretend I wasn't shaking. The blanket slipped a little, and without thinking, I adjusted it so it covered us both again. Our shoulders brushed. Neither of us moved away. "I didn't think it would get this bad," I said, more to fill the silence than anything else. "Me neither," he replied. His voice was calm, but I could hear the strain under it. "We'll be okay, though." That confidence, so steady, so grounded, caught me off guard. For a second, I forgot I was supposed to be the adult in the situation. Forgot that I was the one who usually reassured everyone else. Another car a few spaces ahead shut off its engine. Then another. The storm had settled in for the night. I exhaled slowly. "Looks like we're really stuck." He nodded. "Looks like it." The cold kept creeping in, stubborn and relentless. I shifted closer without announcing it, telling myself it was practical, that body heat mattered more than awkwardness. When he noticed, he didn't flinch. He didn't comment. He just stayed. My head rested back against the seat, eyes closed for a moment, listening to the wind scrape along the doors. It felt strange how quickly the world outside stopped existing. No responsibilities, no roles, no one watching. Just us, suspended in time. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, not even sure what I was apologizing for. "For what?" he asked. "For putting you in this situation." He shook his head. "You didn't. The storm did." There was a pause after that, a long one. I became painfully aware of how warm he was compared to the air around us, how steady his breathing felt, how safe it made me feel in a way I hadn't expected, and definitely hadn't planned. I shifted again, just slightly, and this time our arms touched fully. Skin through fabric, real contact. My heart picked up. I told myself to move, to create space, to do the right thing. But instead, I stayed right where I was. And in that quiet, snow-locked car, I realized the line I was trying so hard not to think about was already closer than I'd ever admitted. The longer we sat there, the more that line blurred. Not because anything was happening, but because of how aware I was of every breath, every small movement. I tried to ground myself, looked at the dashboard, checked my phone again, even though I knew there wouldn't be any updates. No signal, no new alerts. Just the same time staring back at me, like it had given up too. He shifted slightly, careful, like he didn't want to make things uncomfortable. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, then realized he couldn't see me well in the dim light. "Yeah, just cold." He hesitated, then said, "You can lean in more if you need to. I don't mind." It was such a simple sentence. Thoughtful, respectful. And that's what made it dangerous. I told myself I was overthinking it, that this was just two adults trying to get through an unexpected night. Still, when I leaned in, I felt it immediately. The warmth, the steadiness, the way my body relaxed without my permission. I hadn't realized how tense I'd been. Outside, the storm softened into a constant hush. Snowflakes drifted past the windows, blurring the world into something unreal, like we'd slipped out of normal life and into a place where time moved differently. "I remember when you were younger," I said suddenly, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "You used to come over all the time, always polite, always quiet." He smiled a little. "I was nervous back then." "About what?" "You," he said, then quickly added, "Well, your house, your rules, everything." I laughed softly, surprised. I never thought of myself as intimidating. He looked at me then, really looked at me. "You kind of were." That comment stayed with me longer than it should have. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged. Like both of us were suddenly aware that we were no longer talking about the past. We were standing firmly in the present. I swallowed, choosing my next words carefully. "Well," I said, forcing a light tone, "I guess some things change." "And some don't," he replied. The way he said it, calm, certain, made my chest tighten. I stared ahead again, heart beating faster, knowing I was standing at the edge of something I shouldn't step into. And yet, the storm wasn't going anywhere. I pulled the blanket up a little higher, more out of habit than necessity. The cold wasn't the problem anymore. It was the stillness. The way every sound felt magnified. The way his presence filled the space beside me without him doing anything at all. "I should probably text my son," I said, mostly to remind myself why this felt complicated. "No signal," he replied gently, holding up his phone. I already tried. Of course he had. Another reminder that we were cut off. No interruptions. No outside voices pulling us back to reality. I sighed and leaned my head against the seat again. He's going to worry. He knows you're capable, he said. You always are. That caught me off guard. I turned slightly, meeting his eyes for the first time in a while. There was no flirtation there, no smugness, just sincerity. And somehow, that made everything heavier. You've grown up, I said quietly, almost to myself. He smiled, but it wasn't playful. So have you. I didn't know how to respond to that. My life had been responsibilities for so long. Routine, expectations, being careful, being someone everyone relied on. Sitting there in that frozen moment, I realized how rare it was to just be seen, without any role attached. The blanket shifted again as the car rocked slightly in the wind. Instinctively, I reached out to steady myself. My hand landed on his arm. I froze. So did he. For a second, neither of us moved. I could feel the warmth through his coat, the tension under his stillness. This wasn't accidental anymore, but it wasn't intentional either. I should have pulled away. Instead, I slowly lifted my hand, resting it back in my lap like nothing had happened. I'm sorry, I said, too quickly. It's okay, he replied just as fast. But the air had changed. The silence that followed wasn't neutral anymore. It carried weight, meaning. The kind that makes you hyper-aware of what you're choosing not to do. I stared out at the snow, my reflection faint in the glass. Somewhere between the cold, the isolation, and the way the night had stretched on, I felt something shift inside me. Not desire, something quieter, lonelier. And I knew if I wasn't careful, that feeling could say something neither of us were ready to hear. The storm eventually eased, not all at once, but enough for the world to slowly come back into focus. Plows passed, engines around us restarted, headlights cut through the dark like nothing strange had happened at all. We pulled the blanket away, both of us suddenly aware of how close we'd been, how quiet it had gotten inside that car. The spell broke without a word needing to be said. When traffic finally started moving again, we didn't talk much. Not because things were awkward, but because we both understood something had existed only in that moment, in that isolation, in that pause from real life. And moments like that don't survive daylight. I dropped him off safely. We said goodnight, polite, normal, exactly how it should be. Later, lying awake in my own bed, I replayed the night, not with regret, but with clarity. Nothing crossed a line, but something touched it. And that was enough to remind me how thin some boundaries really are, and how important it is to step back before a moment becomes a memory you can't put down. The snow melted a few days later. Life went on. But every time winter comes around now, I remember that night, and how close silence and connection can feel when the world disappears for just a little too long.